Most people treat birthdays like a pause button. Sleep in, scroll through messages, maybe post a highlight reel and call it a day. Caitlyn Clark did the opposite. While the internet was busy celebrating her, she disappeared into a place most fans never see up close. No cameras, no spectacle, just hardwood, sweat, and intent. And that choice alone tells you this story isn't about dedication or grind culture. It's about something far more urgent. Because this wasn't a feel-good workout or a symbolic flex. It was calculated. The location, the timing, the person standing across from her, all of it points to a reality that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Caitlyn Clark isn't training like this because she wants to get better. She's training like this because she knows what's coming next, and she doesn't trust the system around her to prepare her for it. There's been a lot of talk about her work ethic, her confidence, her mindset, but that's surface-level stuff. When you zoom out and actually connect the dots, this moment feels less like inspiration and more like a warning. A generational talent realizing earlier than most that the league she just entered wasn't fully built for someone like her, and instead of waiting for it to adjust, she made a move that quietly exposed the gap. That's what makes this so fascinating. This isn't a birthday story, it's a survival story. A signal that Caitlyn Clark is already operating on a different timeline than the rest of the league. And once you understand why she had to make this choice, you start to see the WNBA and her future in it very differently. There were no balloons, no long dinner, no carefully staged photos meant to remind everyone how big the moment was. Caitlyn Clark spent her birthday the same way she spends most pressure-filled moments, by removing distractions and leaning into work. But what made this day different wasn't the effort, it was the message behind it. While fans were posting highlights and counting accolades, she was putting herself somewhere intentional, somewhere that signaled this wasn't about tradition or comfort. She didn't walk into just any gym. She chose an NBA training facility, a place designed for players who are already expected to be elite, not still learning how to survive. That decision matters because environments shape habits, and habits shape ceilings. Caitlyn didn't want a celebration. She wanted clarity. She wanted a setting that reflected the level she believes she belongs at, not the level she's supposed to grow into slowly. And that choice wasn't random or symbolic, it was strategic. When a player skips the easy route on a day meant for relaxation, it usually means something has shifted internally. This wasn't about posting workout clips or proving toughness, it was about urgency, about acknowledging that what got her here won't be enough to carry her forward. That's the part most people missed. This wasn't a feel-good, first-in, last-out moment. It was the first visible sign that Caitlyn Clark has already moved past the honeymoon phase of the league. And once you understand why she felt the need to do that, the rest of the story starts to fall into place. At first glance, it sounds simple. A new trainer, another off-season tweak, something athletes do all the time. But that surface-level reading completely misses what's actually happening here. Because the person Caitlyn Clark chose to work with doesn't just change her routine, it changes the entire lens through which her development is being approached. This isn't a trainer whose experience lives entirely within the WNBA bubble. This is someone shaped by NBA environments, where development is aggressive, specific, and unforgiving. Where players aren't just taught how to execute moves, but how to survive once the league has memorized them. That distinction matters more than most fans realize. At the highest level, everyone can shoot, everyone can dribble. The difference is who can still create when defenders already know what's coming. That's the kind of perspective this trainer brings, an understanding of spacing at full speed, of reads that have to be made before the defense even commits, of how small advantages are created and punished in real time. It's less about adding flashy skills and more about refining decision-making under pressure, the kind of development that doesn't show up in highlight clips but decides careers. And there's another detail that can't be ignored. This move also signals a clean break from the approach she took last offseason. The trainer who helped guide her through that transition is no longer in the picture. That alone tells you Caitlyn didn't just want adjustments, she wanted a reset. a recognition that what worked in one phase of her career wasn't fully preparing her for the next. Because when a player at her level makes a change like this, it's rarely emotional, it's evaluative. It's someone looking at the results, the resistance, the limitations they ran into, and deciding that the margin for error is already shrinking. And that realization leads directly to the most uncomfortable part of this story, the moment when good intentions quietly stopped being enough.
Last offseason, the message was loud and almost unanimous. She needed to get stronger, bigger, more physical. The league was tougher, defenders were grabbing, bumping, leaning, and the assumption was simple. If Caitlyn Clark wanted to survive, she had to match that force. It sounded logical. It sounded responsible. And for a player entering a league built on physicality, it felt unavoidable. So she committed to it. She added noticeable muscle, her upper body filled out, her frame looked sturdier, more prepared for contact. When photos surfaced, people reacted immediately. Some praised the transformation, others were shocked by how quickly her body had changed. On the surface, it looked like progress, like the exact adjustment everyone had been calling for. But here's where the story gets uncomfortable. That added size came with trade-offs no one wanted to talk about. Her movement wasn't quite as fluid. Her shot rhythm felt different. The natural looseness that made her dangerous off the dribble started to tighten. Nothing drastic, nothing obvious enough to spark panic, just small changes that only show up when margins are thin. And then came the injury, plantar fasciitis, the kind of issue that often appears when the body is asked to move differently than it's built for, when load increases, when weight distribution changes. Now, to be clear, no one can say that off-season decision directly caused it, but the timing raised eyebrows. When you alter your center of gravity, when you add mass quickly, the stress has to go somewhere. For a player whose game relies on quick stops, sharp cuts, and explosive first steps, those stresses matter a lot. And once Caitlyn experienced that reality firsthand, something shifted. Because the lesson wasn't that strength doesn't matter. It was that strength, applied the wrong way, can quietly take something away. That realization didn't just change her body, it changed her philosophy. And it set the stage for a very different approach moving forward, one that focused less on matching the league's force and more on staying true to what actually makes her unstoppable. This offseason, the change was subtle but unmistakable. Caitlyn Clark didn't announce it, she didn't explain it. She just showed up looking different, leaner, lighter on her feet. The stiffness that crept into her movement last year was gone, replaced by a flow that felt familiar. Not a step backward, but a recalibration. It was a quiet admission that something had been learned, that trying to overpower the league wasn't the long-term answer. Caitlyn was never built to win by absorbing contact and muscling through defenders. Her edge has always come from timing, angles, and speed of thought, from seeing the floor one beat ahead and punishing hesitation. This version of her body reflects that truth. What makes this pivot so important is that it isn't about giving anything up. She didn't abandon strength, she refined it. She kept what helps her absorb contact without sacrificing the qualities that make her dangerous. That balance is hard to find, especially under the pressure she's been carrying since the moment she entered the league. And here's the part most people aren't saying out loud. This shift suggests she's done trying to fit into the league's mold. Instead of reshaping herself to survive WNBA physicality, she's reshaping her preparation to neutralize it. That's a massive mental adjustment, and it usually doesn't happen this early in a career. Because once a player stops asking, "How do I survive this?" and starts asking, "How do I solve this?" everything changes. The training focus changes, the priorities change, the ceiling changes. And that question leads directly to the most important element of this offseason. Not how she looks, but how she's being challenged every single day. On the surface, a workout is a workout. Shots go up, dribbles hit the floor, sweat pours. That's what most people see in off-season clips. But at the highest level, the difference between improvement and stagnation has nothing to do with volume. It has everything to do with resistance. And that's where Caitlyn Clark's approach quietly separates itself. Empty gym reps are comfortable. You control the pace, you control the angles, you know where the help would be, even when it's not there. And for confidence, that can be useful, but confidence isn't the problem for Caitlyn. The problem is preparation, because no defender in a real game stands still, no read stays clean, no move works the same way twice. That's why elite training environments look chaotic on purpose. Multiple bodies on the floor, someone closing space too fast, someone forcing you into your second or third option. Mistakes are built into the session. Discomfort is the goal. You're not just rehearsing success, you're rehearsing recovery when the first idea fails.
This is where resistance changes everything. Real defenders lean into you. They cut off preferred angles. They sit on tendencies. And suddenly, you're forced to make decisions at game speed, not workout speed. That's how counters are built. That's how instincts are sharpened. And that's how weaknesses stop being theoretical and start getting addressed. For Caitlyn, this kind of environment isn't optional anymore. She's past the stage where repetition alone moves the needle. What she needs now are problems, live ones, the kind that mirror what she sees when defenders have studied her film and come prepared. And once you understand that, you start to notice something else. A specific area defenses targeted that training without resistance simply couldn't fix. The WNBA didn't need long to adapt. It never does. Once the scouting reports caught up and the film was dissected, defenders stopped reacting and started anticipating. They knew where Caitlyn Clark wanted to go. They knew how she liked to create space. And instead of playing honest, they began taking options away before she could even get comfortable. The strategy was simple but effective. Sit on her strengths, shade her preferred angles, force her into spots that felt unfamiliar. Not to shut her down completely, that was never realistic, but to make everything harder, to disrupt rhythm, to turn efficiency into effort. And over time, that wear adds up. This wasn't about exposing flaws as much as it was about testing limits. In college, Caitlyn could live in her comfort zones and still dominate. The gap in talent gave her room to breathe. In the WNBA, that space disappears quickly. Every defender is disciplined, every mistake is punished, and once a tendency is identified, it becomes a focal point. You could see it in how possessions played out. Defenders stayed attached, help came earlier. Finishes that used to feel automatic now required extra creativity. She was still elite, still dangerous, but no longer untouched. And that distinction matters, because it's the moment every great player hits, the point where the league forces you to evolve. The important part is what happened next. Caitlyn didn't push back by forcing shots or doubling down on habits. She absorbed the message. She recognized that the league had made its adjustment, and instead of resisting it, she started preparing for the next layer, the counters that separate stars from players who plateau once the scouting report catches up. When you zoom out, Caitlyn Clark's off-season choices start to look less personal and more structural, because what she ran into wasn't just tougher defense or a steeper learning curve. It was a league ecosystem that wasn't designed to accelerate a player like her. Not because of neglect or bad intentions, but because the infrastructure simply hasn't caught up to the kind of star she represents. In most major professional leagues, elite talent is surrounded by layers of support the moment they arrive. Dedicated development coaches, specialists breaking down tendencies frame by frame, sports science departments tracking load and recovery, entire systems built to fine-tune greatness, not just maintain it. That kind of environment doesn't just protect players, it sharpens them. The WNBA, by comparison, asks stars to carry more of that burden themselves. Resources vary widely from team to team. Development staffs are smaller, off-seasons are shorter, and for players with global attention and non-stop physical pressure, the margin for error becomes razor thin. Caitlyn felt that immediately. The expectations were massive, but the support structure wasn't built to match the speed of her ascent. That gap matters most for players who arrive already close to their ceiling. Caitlyn didn't need foundational growth. She needed refinement under pressure. She needed specialized attention, not generalized development.
And when the system couldn't consistently provide that, she did what elite competitors always do. She found another way. This is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. Caitlyn Clark isn't operating outside the league out of ego. She's doing it out of necessity. Because when a generational talent moves faster than the system around them, adaptation becomes a personal responsibility. And once that realization sets in, the relationship between player and league quietly shifts forever. What happened next didn't stay on the court. It rippled outward, quietly but noticeably. When Caitlyn Clark went down, the impact was immediate, not just for her team, but for the league as a whole. Games felt different, the energy shifted, and behind closed doors, people who rarely panic had to acknowledge something they hadn't fully prepared for. This wasn't just about one player missing time. Caitlyn had become a gravitational force. Viewership spiked when she played. Conversations followed her from arena to arena. When she wasn't on the floor, that momentum softened. And leagues built on momentum can't afford long interruptions, especially when they're still fighting for consistent national attention. There's been plenty of online debate about physicality and officiating, but the real conversations likely happened far from social media, in offices, in meetings, in quiet calls between stakeholders who understand how fragile growth can be. When stars get worn down, the product suffers. When the product suffers, everything downstream feels it. That's when adjustments start happening. Whistles tighten, dangerous contact gets scrutinized, not as a favor to any one player, but as a correction, a recognition that allowing games to drift into chaos doesn't benefit anyone long-term. The league didn't suddenly change its philosophy, it responded to consequences.
But here's the key point. Caitlyn wasn't waiting around to see how those shifts played out. While the league recalibrated, she moved forward. She treated those ripple effects as confirmation, not reassurance, proof that the environment around her was reactive, not proactive. And that understanding only reinforced the decision she had already made, to take control of what she could before circumstances forced her hand again. At a certain point, waiting becomes a risk, and Caitlyn Clark reached that point faster than most. Instead of hoping the league would evolve around her, she started building something parallel to it, quietly, intentionally, piece by piece, not as a rejection of the system, but as an insurance policy against its limits. Hiring her own NBA-level trainer wasn't just about skill work, it was about ownership, control over how her body is managed, how her game is sharpened, how problems are identified and solved before they become visible in real games. She didn't want generic solutions, she wanted precision, and precision requires resources that aren't always available inside team walls. This kind of self-built infrastructure is common in other leagues. Star players surround themselves with trusted specialists, people who understand their tendencies, their rhythms, their warning signs. The difference is timing. Most athletes do this later, once they've already hit a plateau. Caitlyn is doing it now, before one forms. And that's what makes this so forward-thinking. She isn't reacting to failure, she's preventing it. By creating an environment where development is constant, competitive, and honest, she's removing the guesswork. She's making sure that when the league throws its next adjustment at her, she's already rehearsed the answer. This move isn't flashy, it doesn't come with headlines or announcements, but it's the kind of decision that quietly extends careers and raises ceilings. And once other players start paying attention, once they realize what she's actually doing, this approach may become less of an exception and more of a blueprint. This is where things shift from interesting to unsettling, because the version of Caitlyn Clark that already existed was good enough to change games, swing momentum, and bend defensive game plans around her presence. And that was before the adjustments, before the recalibration, before the deeper layer of preparation kicked in. What makes this version different isn't raw athleticism. It never has been. Caitlyn's edge lives in skill, timing, and decision-making. Those are the traits that age well, the traits that expand instead of erode. When a player like that starts layering counters on top of an already elite foundation, the growth curve doesn't slow down, it steepens. A lighter, more mobile Caitlyn with real resistance-based training doesn't just react faster, she recognizes patterns sooner. She understands what defenders are trying to take away before they fully commit. And when the first option is gone, she doesn't force it, she flows into the next one. That's the difference between scoring and controlling a game. The league already knows how dangerous she is when she's in rhythm. What it hasn't fully dealt with yet is a Caitlyn who's comfortable being uncomfortable, one who expects contact, who's prepared for traps, who has answers for the angles defenders used last season. That kind of player doesn't just beat coverage, she punishes it. And the scariest part? This isn't a finished product, it's a trajectory. A player whose game is built on intelligence and feel can keep adding layers for years. So if this version shows up next season, sharper, smarter, and more adaptable, the question won't be whether the league can slow her down, it'll be whether it can keep up at all. When you trace everything back, it always leads to that birthday. Not because of what Caitlyn Clark did that day, but because of what it revealed. A player who understands that comfort is the enemy, that waiting is a gamble, that if you want longevity at the highest level, you can't assume the system will evolve fast enough to protect or sharpen you. This story was never really about a workout, a trainer, or even an off-season plan. It was about a realization. Caitlyn entered the league as the most watched rookie in years, and within one season, she learned a truth most players don't grasp until much later. Greatness requires infrastructure, and when that infrastructure doesn't fully exist, you build it yourself. The irony is impossible to ignore. The same league that struggled to absorb her impact is about to benefit from everything she's doing now. A more prepared, more durable, more adaptable Caitlyn lifts everyone. Ratings rise, interest grows, the game evolves. But none of that is her responsibility. She isn't fixing the league, she's future-proofing herself. And that's what makes this moment so important. Caitlyn Clark isn't just improving her game, she's redefining how a star survives and thrives inside a system that wasn't built with her in mind. The league can either catch up or chase from behind, because one thing is already clear: she's not slowing down to wait for anyone.